Hello everyone, we'll get started in just a few minutes. If you have not yet, please sign in on the sign-in sheet located in the chat. You may also indicate there if you would like to make a public comment or not. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, this is Gary Middleton. I'm joining by phone.
All right, thank you for letting me know, Gary.
Good morning, everybody. I gather we're just waiting for the crowd to gather, right?
That is correct. We have a few more folks and we'll start off at 9:30. And if you have not yet, please go ahead and sign in on the sign-in form located in the chat box. You can also indicate there if you would like to make a public comment. Thank you. All right, everyone, we can go ahead and get started. I want to say Good morning, and thank you guys for attending another virtual meeting of the Region L Planning Group. If you have not yet, please sign in on the sign-in sheet located in the chat box. You can also indicate there if you would like to make a public comment during this meeting. I'd also like to ask that if you have not yet, please mute yourself so we can kind of limit background noise during the meeting.
Said the double doors and said, I have an office.
We're getting some background noise right now, so if you're on the phone, you can also mute yourself. That'll prevent distractions during the meeting. If you're using the website, you can mute yourself using the mic button down here. You can turn your camera on or off here, and up here indicates where the chat box is, and that's where you can find the sign-in sheet and the sheet to indicate whether or not you would like to make a public comment. Here's a link here. Again, it is in the chat box if you need to use it. So we'll go ahead and get started with agenda item number 1, roll call. If I call your name, if you could please unmute yourself and let me know that you are here for our records. And sorry, with Tim Andrus,
I'm here.
John Byram,
Here.
Kurt Campbell,
Here.
Pat Calhoun, Ray Chavez, Alan Cockrell, Will Connolly, Charlie Flatten,
Here.
Vic Hildebrand, Kevin Yannick, Tom Youngman,
Here.
Russell Labus,
Here.
Glenn Lord,
Here.
Dan Meyer, Gary Middleton,
Here.
Jonathan Stinson for Kevin Padson,
Here.
Ileana Pena,
Here.
Robert Puente, Humberto Ramos,
Here.
Steve Ramsey, Weldon Riggs, Roland Ruiz,
Here.
Diane Savage,
Here.
Steve Graham,
Here.
Greg Sengelman,
Here.
Mitchell Sowards,
Andrew Young for Mitchell Center.
Heather Sumter,
Here.
Tom Taggart,
Here.
Ian Taylor,
Here.
Diane Wasenich,
Here.
Adam Lebonsky.
Here.
Thank you. Elizabeth McCoy,
Here.
Ronald Feisler, Ileana Delgado,
Here.
Don McGee, Marty Kelly,
Here.
Joseph McDaniel,
Here.
Jamie McCool, Carl Kroll, and Rusty Ray.
Here.
All right, thank you. Chair Andrus, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate that.
We'll move to agenda item 2. Well, excuse me, before we move on to agenda item 2, I think we all noticed that there can be some difficulties with communicating in this sort of forum. So as we move through the agenda item, we'll try to be careful and provide some time for people to unmute, make comments if they wish to or not, or ask questions, that sort of thing. So I encourage you to speak up if you have a comment or a question. Let's move to agenda item 2. Caitlin, do we have anyone registered to make public comment?
I do not have it indicated so in my sign-in form. If there's someone calling in who would like to make a public comment, will you please state so now? All right,
Okay.
Chair Andrus, I think we may proceed.
Hey, Caitlin, this is Alan Cockrell. I had a little trouble unmuting my computer, but I am here.
All right, thank you, sir.
And this is Donovan Burton for Robert Puente. I think Robert is trying to get on, so I'll be his stand-in until he's on the line.
Excellent, thank you.
And Caitlin, this is Patrick Garcia. I'm here for Ray Chavez. I was just signing on when you were calling Ray's name.
Perfect, thank you. I will send out this form to everyone, all the planning group members, so they can double check with me through email that they have been counted. If you
There's
would
no
like,
additional.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
If there's no additional comments, we'll move to agenda item 3. Approval of minutes of the previous meeting on November 5th. Those minutes were sent out to the planning group prior to the meeting. I hope everyone's had an opportunity to review those. Is there any discussion on the minutes? If there's no discussion on the minutes, is there a motion to approve?
This is
So
John.
moved.
I move.
Gary Middleton, second.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no objection, we'll indicate that motion passed by consensus. We'll pause for a moment for anyone to object. There being none, the motion is considered passed. We'll move to agenda item number 4, status of an Edwards Aquifer Authority Habitat Conservation Plan. My understanding, Mr. Storman is intending to make some comments. Mr. Storman, if you're present, please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and fellow and committee members, I appreciate the opportunity to give you a quick update. I have one item of note that I'll share with you. This past December, on the December 10th, we had to call for Condition M on the San Marcos River, and Condition M basically is a trigger under our incidental take permit where flows drop below 120 CFS, and then when they drop below 120 CFS, we look at curtailing particular habitat and restoration activities, so basically to limit impact on the species that are in the river. We also have to notify U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which we did on December 11th, to let them know that this has been activated. The flows still linger around the 110 to 120 range currently. So it's not a severe drop, but it obviously has dropped below and is triggering certain types of biological and water quality monitoring protocols that'll be conducted, and those are basically to determine habitat availability and then also look at impacts to the covered species to make sure that there's no disturbance happening unnecessarily. There are exempt activities that were agreed to as part of the ITP that are agreed to as part of the Condition M, and so those are also available to those who work in the river and do their activities as far as part of the HCP. So those are available as well, and we're working with the various stakeholders who are doing those activities that are exempted from the Condition M requirements. Anyway, I just wanted to make that known, since that is a step not in the positive direction. We would rather see flows higher We're waiting for rains to come, so hopefully we'll see an impact that the flows will return to a healthier level as far as for the species as well as for the communities that are as far as for the city of San Marcos. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to take them, but that was the only item of note I wanted to share.
Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Are there any questions or comments regarding that report? Okay, there being none, we'll move to agenda item 5. A status report regarding the BBAST and BBEST committee. I believe Mr. Mast, if present, would make some comments.
Good morning, members. It's a very brief update. We received word from the Water Development Board that their internal review of the statewide synthesis of environmental flow studies has taken a bit longer than anticipated. And so they anticipate providing BBEST, the Bay and Basin Expert Science Team members, and the stakeholder committee members that want to review that report, getting in touch with them within this month, and then those members would have a month to respond to the report. We would be looking to schedule a BBASC meeting, a stakeholder committee meeting, following that process, so the stakeholder committee can learn for themselves what was in that report and have the ability to ask questions at that time. But that's the report. That process has taken a bit longer than anticipated. We originally thought that report would have been available back in December, but it's moving forward, and we look forward to this getting the committee back together.
Thank you, Mr. Mast. Are there any questions or comments regarding that report? There being none, we'll move to agenda item 6, Texas Water Development Board communications. Ms. McCoy, are you on the line prepared to make a report?
Yes, good morning. This is Elizabeth McCoy with the Water Development Board. I've got a few updates to provide you today. We touched on this at the last meeting, but I wanted to provide an update. The board is contracting with UT's Bureau of Economic Geology to assess mining water use and update the mining demand projections for the 2026 regional water plans. We held a kickoff meeting for the study in December, and a recording of that meeting, as well as some information on the study timeline and scope, are now available on our website at the link that's provided on the slide. The planning area boundary review process, the public comment period was open at the end of last year and closed on December 3rd. We anticipate board action on the planning area boundaries coming up in February. The request for applications for the 6-cycle regional water planning grant funds will be posted in the Texas Register on March the 12th. Once it's been posted, we'll be following up directly with the planning group political subdivisions to let them know. There's going to be a 30-day application period, and then we anticipate board authorization to negotiate contracts coming up in June. The deadline to execute those initial contracts between the Water Development Board and the political subdivisions is August 31st. Next slide, please. And then next up, we anticipate a rulemaking to begin in early 2021 to address items related to the upcoming initial contracts. Staff are going to be asking the Water Development Board to authorize publishing a proposed rulemaking at their February 10th board meeting. This is related to Texas Administrative Code Chapter 355, which is the chapter on regional water planning grants, and 357.21, which is related to the planning group public notice requirements. If approved, the proposed rules will be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day public comment period. The kind of key changes that are being considered and to be aware of that are associated with upcoming activities include a proposal to allow for limited reimbursement of certain labor costs for planning group political subdivisions, which would be limited by the contract expense budget. and a proposal to remove the 30-day notice requirement that's associated with when the Water Development Board takes action on the funding applications. And because of this proposed change, it'll be important for political subdivision staff to coordinate with us to determine if this notice will end up being necessary or not. And then finally, I'd like to give an update on the Interregional Planning Council. You'll recall that last year, the council developed recommendations regarding interregional coordination, best practices for future planning, and planning water resources for the state as a whole. These recommendations were directed to the Water Development Board, the legislature, planning groups, and future councils. The report was submitted to the board back in October and distributed to the planning groups. It's also available on our website at the link on the slide. Staff have presented a work plan to our board at a November work session on how to address the council's recommendations. And we've been working with the council to clarify recommendations on state involvement in project development and planning for droughts worse than a drought of record. Next slide, please. Some of the council's recommendations regarding coordination with other regions are proposed to be addressed in our next round of contracting and guidance. A recommendation on revising the Texas Open Meetings Act to allow for continued virtual meeting options for the planning groups and their committees has been included in the board's legislative priorities report for this session. And then a recommendation regarding the eligible funding for certain direct labor activities for political subdivisions will be addressed in upcoming rule revisions in 2021. We'll be distributing more information to the planning groups on the council's progress and recommendations in the coming year. And a reminder that the current council dissolved upon adoption of the 2022 State Water Plan, which is anticipated in summer of 2021. Nominations for the next council will be solicited following the adoption of the State Water Plan. That's all the updates I have for you today, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments at this point? Okay, there being none, we'll move forward to agenda item 7, chair report. I have a few items to bring forward to the group, some of which Elizabeth may have touched on. The planning group received notice that the regional water plan was adopted. We also received notice yesterday regarding a discrepancy that was discovered between the regional water plan and the data entered into the various databases regarding, this is in regards to the Siesta project. The capital costs were in one section of the report compared to the database do not agree. That's the discrepancy. At this point, we've been informed that TWDB intends to move forward with adopting a state water plan that has the correct value used. If the planning group wish to correct that discrepancy, it's our understanding we'd have to go through an amendment process, which is, well, could be fairly lengthy and administratively costly to do so, but it would be required to go through the amendment process. TWDB hasn't indicated that they're going to require us to do so. So unless there's some interest in going through that effort to resolve that discrepancy, we won't do so. Of course, if for some reason the group undertakes an amendment for any other reason, then we could address the typographical error at that time. The other item I guess I'll bring up is it's sort of a reminder for planning group members. In the past, it's my recollection that we've had various informational reports or presentations requested to be made to the planning group. I think that's good and beneficial, but if we're going to do that, it'd be helpful If you're going to make such a request or make a suggestion that we receive such a report, other than the standing items that we get reports on, if you would let us know so that we can plan for that and work it into the rest of the work schedule. And then finally, I've been notified that my nomination to the Interregional Planning Council was accepted. There have been no meetings of that council since my placement on it. They may call a meeting if need be, and of course I'll participate in it with that if that should occur. We've also been notified and have scheduled a meeting of the chairs of the regional planning groups for February 17th. I'll participate in that meeting, of course, and provide you an update at our next meeting. That's all I have to report. Are there any questions or comments regarding the chair's report?
Tim, this is Mr. Ramos.
Oh, Mr. Ramos.
I'm the sponsor, Canyon Regional is the sponsor of Siesta. We don't anticipate an amendment to the plan, but one of the things I am concerned about is, was this a discrepancy on our part? Was this a discrepancy that, how did this occur so that way we can prevent this from happening again next year if there's a project that, or next planning cycle, in the event that there's a project that we need funded or somebody else needs funded?
Sure. So it's my understanding that the discrepancy amounts to a typographical error in the report, whereby the capital costs in that written portion of the report reduced that cost from $107 million to, I think, $107,000, something to that effect. So it's a typographical error, and apparently was missed in the review of the written report as compared to the data entered into the, I think it's called the DB22 database and perhaps other locations. TWDB has reviewed that, and based on the fact that the proper number has been placed in the database in numerous places, they feel confident that they have the right number to use for the state water plan. I agree with you. We certainly don't want those sort of discrepancies, and I don't think it'll have an impact on the rest of the planning process and the securing of funds, that sort of thing. In future regional water plans, I think it'll be incumbent upon us and our consultant to be very careful and double check those values to make sure that there aren't those sorts of discrepancies. Does that speak to your question?
Yes, it does, sir. Thank you.
Well, are there any other comments or questions regarding the chair report? Okay, if there's none, we'll move to agenda item 8, discussion and appropriate action authorizing the administrator to solicit nominations to fill vacancies at the planning group. We've received notice of 3 members resigning their positions on the planning group. That's Ileana Pena representing environmental interests, Kevin Yannick representing electrical utility interests, and Stephen Ramus representing water utilities. Of course, we have to fill those vacancies, and the sooner we do so, all the better. Those new members will have the opportunity to fully participate throughout the whole process. Ultimately, we need to grant authorization for the administrator to solicit nominations to fill those vacancies. But before we do so, I think it'd be important to open it up to comment. If anyone would like to discuss the matter, but in particular, if there are other members that know at this point that they do not intend to, fill their position on the planning group, if you could let us know now, that would assist us and limit the administrative work associated with filling those vacancies. So with that, I open it to the floor. Okay. If there are no comments,
I guess I would have, I'm sorry, this is Tom Taggart. I would have one question. For those of us that do intend to continue in our, role, is there a requirement that we still submit nomination and supporting documentation for continuance?
Hi, Tom. That's not required until your term is up. We have quite a few folks whose terms will be up in August. So at the next meeting, we'll just have this item on the agenda again, and I will be able to send out the nomination form and document materials to all of the folks who are planning on re-upping. So you don't have to worry about it now, just later in the year.
Thank you.
Okay. So is there a motion to authorize the administrator to solicit nominations to fill the vacancies of the planning group?
Glenn Lord, so moved.
Mr. Ramos, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Well, rather, we won't vote. Unless there's objection, we'll consider the motion passed by consensus. Any objection? Okay, we'll consider the motion passed. We'll move to agenda item 9, discussion regarding potential 2026 plan enhancement process. I just wanted to provide the group the opportunity to speak up if there's any concern or interest in revisiting previous, well, bylaws, I suppose, and guiding principles that were developed. Now would be the time to identify those and try to figure a path forward. I'm not aware of any interest to do so, but I want to make sure the group had an opportunity to work on that if there was the interest.
And this is Glenn Lord. I think I'd like to go through a cycle where we take advantage of all the hard work that we put in before and see how that streamlines the process. Just a thought, but.
Very good. Thank you, Glenn. Any other comments? Well, very good. Should you decide and think about this later that yes, there's some topic that you'd like to consider or revisit, let me or Caitlin know. Of course, you can always review the bylaws and those guiding principles that we worked on and adopted. Rather, those bylaws and those guiding principles can be located on the planning group's website.
Tim, this is Diane Wasenick, and we have done a great amount of work in the previous cycle and should be able to rely on that work. But if something changes in the legislative session that would affect any of our principles, particularly about groundwater use or any of the many things that are going on regarding water, we might, have to look at one or two of them, but I'm not anticipating any big changes at the legislature. I just know that can happen.
That's a good comment, Diane. Thank you. Yes, we'll need to do that, and should that need arise, we'll address it at that time. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, we'll move to agenda item 10, discussion appropriate action regarding regional liaison nominations to the other regions, in particular region NJK, M, and P. This was on our agenda at the last meeting. It's a requirement that we identify planning group members to serve as liaisons to these other regions, and then they participate, of course, that's the intent, that they participate in the work efforts of those other regions and serve as a go-between between the two groups. I will open it, this agenda item open for discussion. I'm hoping some of you have given that some thought, and if you're willing and can serve in that role, I hope you'll speak up. Otherwise, we'll continue to place this item on the agenda so that we can address that in future meetings. Are there any comments or discussion regarding this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I am John Barham, and I am attending Region M meetings. Currently, I would be glad to serve in a liaison capacity should the committee or should the group see fit to nominate me in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Byron. Consider yourself nominated. I so nominate you to fill that position.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else willing to serve as a liaison? If the group finds it acceptable, I'm willing to serve as a liaison to Region P.
So nominated, Glenn Lord.
Very fine, thank you, Mr. Lord. Is there any other discussion or any other members willing to serve as liaison? Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Tim, just a second. This is Diane Wasenick. I didn't hit my unmute quick enough. I was waiting to see if anybody else would volunteer, but you know, Region K is a region that my family lives in, so I follow what's going on, and I have good friends that serve on that board. So I'm kind of up on what's going on with them. And so I'm willing to monitor their meetings, especially at the beginning. I think they're all going to be by Zoom. I don't even have to travel. So I'll do K if you want to nominate me.
I'll be happy to nominate you, Diane.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have nominations for Region N, Region K, and Region P. Any other discussion or members willing to serve in those roles?
Yeah,
we still have a.
Sorry, this is Adam E. Blonsky. I'm willing to do J, Region J.
Okay. Adam, consider yourself, I so nominate you for that region. One left, people. Region M, anyone willing to serve? We'll auction it if we need to. Okay. So we have a motion. I believe we have a second to designating liaisons to Region N, J, K, and P. Is there a second to those four nominations?
Mr. Chairman, this is Riggs. I second that motion.
Very good. We have a motion and second on the nominations. Is there any objection to those individuals filling those roles? There being none, we'll consider that motion passed by consensus. Thank you, gentlemen, and ladies, for being willing to participate in that way. We appreciate it. With that, we'll move to agenda item 11, status of Region 12, San Antonio Regional Flood Planning Group. I believe, Caitlin, you're going to make comments.
Thank you. So the San Antonio River Authority is also the public administrator for the San Antonio Regional Flood Planning Group. Chair Nefi Garza has instructed us to move forward with the RFA process, which we have done so. We have submitted our application for grant funds, and it has been accepted by the Texas Water Development Board. We are currently in the procurement process, working on the solicitation documents for a technical consultant, and we'll hope to be going out with that fairly soon. We have our next meeting is going to be actually on next Tuesday. We'll be reviewing a bunch of administrative items, just as we are doing here in Region L. The kickoff process has been going fairly smoothly. There are a few notice requirement issues that have popped up because the system is different for the regional flood planning groups than it is for the regional water planning groups. But hopefully we will move forward more smoothly with that process in the future. If there are any questions regarding Region 12, please reach out to me and I will be happy to answer them. And I believe that Lauren Willis from GBRA is going to be speaking on Region 11. Lauren, if you are here, feel free.
Hi, good morning. I am Lauren Willis, and GBRA was designated as the Region 11 political subdivision. So we have been working through the same process as everyone else here. Our chair is Doug Miller, and I did want to let y'all know that we did add 3 additional voting members in the categories for river authorities, counties, and municipalities, and we also added 1 non-voting member. So we have a total group of 15 voting members for our regional flood planning group. Just as San Antonio has done, we have submitted our grant application to the Water Development Board, and that has been accepted. So we are working through that process right now with the board. Our request for qualifications for a technical consultant was actually posted yesterday on BidNet, and it's being published today in the San Antonio paper. So the release date will be February 4th. Some other notable dates for that, we will have a date for February 19th for the submission of questions. And then our proposal deadline will be March 5th at 2 p.m., so on a Friday. We do have our website up and running for this group. It's GuadalupeRFPG.org. So all of our meetings and materials are up and running on that website. And so far, our meetings are being held on the first Wednesday of the month at 2 p.m. And we are holding those both in person at GBRA and virtually. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, are there any comments or questions regarding reports from the members?
I had a question. I just didn't quite hear on Region 12. Was that person from San Antonio River Authority?
Hi, Diane. Yes, it's Caitlin Heller. I'm also working on the Region 12 with the San Antonio River Authority as their public administrator.
Great, thank you so much. And then the website that the Region 12 person from GBRA mentioned, was that FRP as in planning.org?
Yes, it's for the Regional Flood Planning Group. So it's GuadalupeRFPG.org.
RFPG. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any additional discussion or questions regarding the reports? There being none, we'll move on to agenda item 12, potential agenda items for the next meeting. At this point, I think we have 3 topics we know we'll discuss at that meeting. Incidentally scheduled for May 6th. Correct, Caitlin?
That is correct. The
Very
few of the items that we'll be discussing at the next meeting are pre-planning public meetings, and I will be sending out a doodle poll to planning group members to secure dates for those pre-planning meetings, as well as some historical information on how we've done it in the past. We'll have voting for the nominations to fill vacancies that we have discussed earlier in this meeting. And then we will provide an update on our solicitation for a technical consultant, as in May, the Texas Water Development Board will have released those documents that Elizabeth mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions regarding our next meeting and those agenda items?
You could remind me of our next meeting date.
I show May 6th, 2021.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move to agenda item 13, second opportunity for public comment. Have we received any requests to make public comments?
I have received no virtual requests for public comments.
Okay. Is there anyone participating in the meeting that would like to make public comment? We'll pause for a moment to receive that. Okay, there being no public comment, we've concluded all the business scheduled for this meeting, and we'll adjourn in just a moment. I did want to thank everyone for participating in the meeting and dealing with the technical difficulties that arise when doing so. But also want to take a moment to thank those members that are leaving our group for their participation. All of them are longtime members, and I know personally they put a great deal of time and effort into the planning process. They were engaged members. And with that, I say thank you to Ileana, Kevin, and Steve for their work. Thank you very much. If there are no other comments or questions, we'll stand adjourned until our next meeting. Okay, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.
Thank you.